I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with this before you actually answer. Where does your best business actually come from? Not where you think it comes from, not where you hope it comes from, but where it actually comes from. Most companies can tell you a story about where their best business comes from, but they cannot tell you the data. And the data is probably somewhere, but what I have seen is that most companies are not in the position or high enough altitude or have the bandwidth to actually do anything with it. And that gap between the story and the data is where most growth strategies quietly fall apart. And really, you think they're a growth strategy, but they're actually a growth story. And over the next 6 episodes, my goal is to close that gap in this growth engine series. So I want to introduce myself. This is Unearth with Shelly Hughes. I'm Shelly Hughes. In this podcast, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of growing a passionate, profitable company. Everything in this podcast that you hear come directly from stories and case studies and everything that clients bring to us when we help them solve their revenue and growth challenges. A lot of times they are stuck in something, or what got them to point A is not going to get them to point B, or point B to point Z. That's really what we do. And so in this podcast, we go through a lot of these stories to help you grow the company that you've always wanted to. Let's talk about the story that we tell ourselves. And here's the thing, this isn't coming out of thin air. This is coming directly from clients that we hear all the time. Every founder or every CEO has an answer to this question. And those answers are usually true. They're just incomplete. And these can be CEOs, these can be founders, COO, whoever is in charge of the commercial strategy. Which, by the way, a big challenge is a lot of times there's no one in charge of the commercial strategy. There's someone in charge of marketing, there's someone in charge of sales, maybe there's someone in charge of marketing, but there's no one really in charge of the growth engine of the company. So here are some of the questions that are incomplete. Here are some of the answers that we get when we ask this question is, referrals work for us. We get a lot from LinkedIn. Events have been good to us. Trade shows are pretty great. All these can be true, and all these are answers to that question of where does good business actually come from? Actual answers that we've gotten from clients. And the story becomes a strategy. Referrals work, so we invest in relationships. But the story does not tell you which relationships, from whom, what makes someone refer you. And you are navigating growth with a highlight reel, essentially, not a map. The things that are shiny and the things that is actually working, but are the clients that you're getting from those channels really the clients that are making a big difference in your business? Because we all know if we've done any type of growth in our business, we know that the small projects aren't going to get us to our ambitious goals. It's the big projects. And so we might be seeing a lot of traffic come from a certain channel, but that might not be the kind of work we want to do to really get to, like I said, our most ambitious goals. And when that highlight reel stops, when referrals slow or when the relationship moves on, you've really no system to fall back on. And I want to talk about why this question really changes everything, because every downstream decision depends on knowing the real answer to this question. And it's every sales hire, every marketing investment, every budget decision, every channel you activate, all of it can trace back to knowing where your best clients come from. And if you don't know, you're essentially betting on a lightning strike hitting at the same place twice. And the companies that scale past this plateau, past this CEO ceiling, past the growth story, again, past couple episodes, I've been talking all about this, and to really prep us to understand what this growth engine series is going to be like, are the ones who answered this with data and not instinct. And so let's talk about what best actually means. Before we can answer where best clients come from, let's define this term. And it's not what most people think. It could be the easiest to win, right? Low friction in the sales process. You know what they need and they believe you can deliver it. Longest retained. They renew without you having to fight for it. Operational and cultural fit is really there from day one. I talk about this with clients too. We have 2 different ways of scaling. There's really one way of scaling, but we have 2 different types of revenue. We have new revenue and we have recurring revenue or repeat revenue. And my definition of scaling is increasing that repeat revenue. That's my definition of scaling. The highest margin, not just the top line. What does each client actually cost you in time, energy, and support? Another thing we talk about when we come in and help solve this problem with our clients specifically is we don't just want revenue, we want healthy revenue. So a lot of times when you look at the customer journey and we come into a client relationship, we have to look inward at the company to understand not just how to get more revenue, but what does healthy revenue look like? Because we could get a client, we could help them get tons of new revenue, but if it's all low profit, then it's not doing very much for us. It's not doing very much for the client. And what we also see, what best actually means is that they have the most referrals generated and they become part of your growth engine, not just a line item on your P&L. Like in the last episode, I talked about your ideal clients refer more ideal clients. So if you can really get into that circle and get into that niche and be very clear to not just you, but the rest of the world, who your ideal client is, that person is going to give you more of them. And that's going to be your referral engine, not just quick line item on your income section of your P. So your best clients are not always, though, your biggest ones. It's one of the most important reframes in this entire series that we're going to get into. So let's talk about what the next 6 episodes are going to do. This series is going to give you a framework to answer this question with data and not a story. The next episode, the first episode in the series, it's going to be about the freebie zone. It's how most companies grew to where they are without ever paying really for growth and why that becomes a trap. The second episode in the series is about CEO revenue versus scalable revenue and the difference between what you have built and what actually scales. That is really the difference between a growth story and a growth strategy. And we'll get into that. Episode 3 of this is going to be what it actually costs you to get a client. Let's talk about customer acquisition costs. Have you ever done that math before? A lot of clients don't like it when we do that math. But the math is really important to understand where your lifetime value is for the client versus how much it took to get the client and understanding the health between the two. Episode 4 is basically your commitment, right? What percentage of your revenue are you actually betting on your growth? For smaller companies, it's a lot of it, right? You constantly thinking about companies putting money back into the business. But it's just doing that math to understand what are you willing to put back into it based on your customer acquisition cost. 5 is, again, we've been talking about this through this entire history of the podcast of where your best business actually comes from, but it's really the diagnostic version, right? And let's talk about data. We can walk through that framework that honestly, I'm just giving away. We do this for clients all the time, but let's walk through that framework. And then the final one is building a revenue plan you can actually track so you can stop hoping your number shows up and start knowing whether it will or honestly whether it won't. And this is not a theory. This is the work that we've been doing for, again, companies 15 million, 30 million, 50 million, 100 million, 120 million. We've been doing this process for these clients because most of these companies almost never do it for themselves. And the ones who do it really are able to change your trajectory. I have a quote it's a Chinese proverb. Essentially, it says, if you do not change your direction soon, you are liable to end up where you're heading. I have a big 24 by 16 or whatever poster hung up in the office because I think it's so easy to just keep trucking along and keep moving in the right direction. And that's okay. If you like the direction you're heading, keep doing it. But you have to define where you want to be and if the direction you're heading correlates with that. Anyway, the question about where your business actually come from, it sounds simple, but the answer, most companies doing the most important work have never actually gotten there. So that changes starting next week when we put out that first episode. Thank you. If you are excited about this, make sure that you follow this show because it's going to definitely pop up in your feed and it's going to help the algorithm know that more people need to listen to this. And definitely send this to a friend or colleague if you think that's going to support them as well. But yeah, I have nothing else for today. Have a wonderful summer day and I will see you next week.